Okay, hello and welcome back to Grockit's OGTV. You're watching the GMAT edition of the official guide television on Grockit.com. My name's Jim Jacobson, and we are in the middle of the reading comprehension section as we go through the official guide to the test, question by question, cover to cover. And when we left off last time, we were on page, let me get this written in here, page 396. And we were on question 103. We're getting this done at about a rate of 2 passages per day. So just a reminder about the format in case you haven't been tuning into the program before. For the reading comprehension section at least, what I've been doing is giving you a little bit of time to read the passage on your own because I at least enthusiastically recommend understanding the passage very well before you hit the questions. There are some people who there's a number of people who will tackle the passage first and, by just kind of skimming it and looking for the answer to the first question they see. And a very small fraction of the people who do that are actually successful at it. Most people do much better by understanding the passage well before they tackle the questions. Anyway, I'll be taking some notes, more thorough than I would take on a real GMAT, but enough to give you the idea of what sorts of things I found noteworthy, and then we'll go through the questions one by one with attention paid to the wrong answer choices in almost every case, because the wrong answer choices are instructive. Getting used to seeing what makes an answer choice wrong can be very valuable. So without talking too long, because we do actually have a larger number of questions to do today, I'll give you, about 4 minutes to read the passage on page 396, and I'll take notes on it while you read. Okay, I feel comfortable stopping there, that it's a relatively short passage and the logic is not too terribly tricky within it. So again, as always, it's worth our while to determine whether the author is trying to convince us of anything, and that's not the case in this one. There is no advocacy, there's no persuasion. It is an explanatory, an expository paragraph explaining about the view of Fraser and Mosteller. Anyway, so question number 103. The passage is primarily concerned with A. Identifying two practices in medical research that may affect the accuracy of clinical trials. And at first it sounds promising because there are two practices, namely collecting less patient information and doing larger samples. And so those are identified, but in neither case do they actually affect the accuracy of clinical trials. And so if anything, in some ways they could increase the accuracy with simpler, more streamlined information gathering and collecting more information from a larger sample size. B, describing aspects of medical research that tend to drive up costs. So one of these is actually specifically listed as driving up costs. That's the collection and the storage of the patient data. And the passage, while it does cover those things, the second one, the larger, more representative sample, in some ways could, well, reduce the costs. And so we aren't necessarily looking at aspects of medical research that tend to drive up costs, because the section on the first one is actually a method to reduce the costs. So while an aspect that increases cost is part of the passage, it's not the main idea. Choice C, evaluating an analysis of certain shortcomings of current medical research practices. So clearly there was an analysis of the shortcomings of current practices in the study that Fraser and Mosteller did in coming up with their suggestions about how to change things. But we're not really evaluating their analysis, we're evaluating their actual solutions. And not really even evaluating, more just hearing about. So evaluating is perhaps too strong a word, and we don't actually really get, the passage isn't primarily about an analysis of those shortcomings. So it's not D. Describing proposed changes to the ways in which clinical trials are conducted. So that is what's going on here. We have the idea, it's in the first sentence, that there should be larger and simpler clinical trials. And how the details of that are what the rest of the passage is about. So we'll keep that one. Choice E, explaining how medical researchers have traditionally conducted clinical trials and how such trials are likely to change. Not at all what the well, I mean, of course, you know, those things are involved. There are medical researchers, there are clinical trials, and there are traditions and changes. But choice E is more about what would happen if the changes suggested were actually scheduled to be implemented, and that's not the case in the span of the passage, so it's not E. Giving us answer choice D is the correct one. Question number 104. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage about a study of the category of patients referred to in lines 21 to 23? So, of course, this is an inference question, and they are kind enough on this one to give us a line citation. Sometimes, when they give you line citations, they will also summarize what occurs at that line, so that if you remember the passage very well and feel confident, you could try to answer the question without going back and looking. In this case, they just say, oh yeah, that thing that happened at line 21, 23, yeah, what's an inference you can make from that? We have to go back and read it. So line 21 to 23, often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. So what can we infer from that line, that they sometimes do studies only on patients who have just the single illness? Is it A, its findings might have limited applicability? That's promising, we'll keep that one. B, it would be prohibitively expensive in its attempt to create ideal conditions. Well, if anything, a more limited scope of your study makes it less expensive. You are dealing with fewer factors, looking at fewer variables, so B seems like the opposite of what we could infer. C, it would be the best way to sample the total population of potential patients. Again, that seems to be the opposite of what's going on. It's really just a small subset of the possible population of patients. D, it would allow researchers to limit information collection without increasing the risk that important variables could be overlooked. D sounds really tempting at first because it would allow researchers to limit information collection. If they're only collecting information from people who only have one illness, they don't have to collect information about their other illnesses, details about it, how it's progressed, where it is, all that stuff. But the second half, this is one of those half right, half wrong answer choices. The second half is clearly outside the scope and the reverse of what they're after, because if they limit the study to people who only have the one sickness, they absolutely are increasing the risk that important variables could be overlooked. For example, how a certain medication interacts with someone who has this illness and this other illness. So D is half right, half wrong, and it really only needs to be half wrong to be entirely wrong. Choice E, its findings would be more accurate if it concerned treatments for a progressive disease than if it concerned treatments for a non-progressive disease. Progressive diseases are mentioned. It's starting in line 30, but this is just a detail from the passage in creating a false split. There is no there's no greater advantage to progressive versus non-progressive diseases other than well, there's no advantage, period. Just that progressive diseases have multiple stages, and those multiple stages need to be accounted for eventually in studies. Anyway, it's not E. So that takes us back to A. Its findings might have limited applicability for the reasons that we already described. Knowing how the drug or treatment acts in an ideal condition still does not account for all the ways that it might act in in normal conditions. So it was choice A. Moving on to the next page. So page 397, question number 105. It can be inferred from the passage that a study limited to patients like those mentioned in lines 21 to 23 would have which of the following advantages over the kind of study proposed by Fraser and Mosteller. And apologies if any of you are related to either of them and I am mispronouncing their names. That is just what happens when you have to read things aloud that would normally be read to oneself. Anyway, so we need to make an inference about that same type of study as opposed to the broader, more representative sample. So what can we infer about the ideal conditions study? What advantages would it have over the thing that they're suggesting? Would it A, yield more data and its findings would be more accurate? Well, so if anything, that's the opposite of what would happen. The limited study under the ideal conditions only, where the patients only have one illness, would collect less information. I don't know about whether its findings would be more accurate. That's kind of neutral, but it definitely would not yield more data, so it's not choice A. It would cost less in the long term, though it would be more expensive in its initial stages. Again, that seems to be the opposite of what would be the case, because what happens is they do it under the ideal conditions and then test it out under other circumstances. And so it actually costs more in the long term and less in the short term. Choice C, it would limit the number of variables researchers would need to consider when evaluating the treatment under study. So that sounds much more likely. Because there's only one illness involved, they really only have to look at how the treatment affects that one illness with no other illnesses involved. The larger, more representative sample that is recommended would have people with other illnesses and other problems, other ages, all sorts of other things that could impact how the drug or treatment is evaluated. There'd be more things to factor out, so C sounds pretty good. So D, it would help researchers identify subgroups of patients with secondary conditions that might also be treatable. If anything, that's true of the larger, more representative sample. E, it would enable researchers to assess the value of an experimental treatment for the average patient. And again, that's I'm listing 180. It's actually just true of the other. They've reversed the relationship. So it's not that it's the reverse of true, it's that they've reversed the relationship in the other direction. So both of these are if they're true of anything, they're true of the proposed larger, more representative sample than the smaller study done only under ideal conditions. So it's answer choice C. Okay, on to number 106. The author mentions patients' ages, line 33, primarily in order to. So we do need to go back and read whenever they give you a line citation. It's worth your time to go back and double check to make sure you get it right. Remember, you don't get points on the GMAT for almost getting it right or for effort. Since your score is entirely determined by the number of questions you get right, it's worth the time to make sure that if you could get it right, that you do get it right. So line 33. It says patients' ages may also affect a treatment's efficacy. And this is in the section at the end of the passage about factors that could impact how well a drug or treatment works, and that these are things that would be captured by doing a larger and more representative sample. So it's an example of that in that section. So we want something like that in the answer choices. A, identify the most critical variable differentiating subgroups of patients. There's nothing that says that age is the most critical variable. B, cast doubt on the advisability of implementing Fraser and Mosteller's proposals about medical research. It's not there to undermine the proposal. C, indicate why progressive diseases may require different treatments at different stages. So this is perhaps the most tempting of the wrong answer choices because it's right after the section about progressive diseases. However, age is simply listed as a factor akin to progressive diseases where different stages could affect how well a drug works. So this is close but not right. D, illustrate a point about the value of enrolling a wide range of patients in clinical trials. And that's what we identified as that section of the passage. That sounds good. E, substantiate an argument about the problems inherent in enrolling large numbers of patients in clinical trials. Now, if anything, it's showing the benefits of having large numbers of patients rather than one of the problems. So this is actually the opposite. So yes, absolutely, illustrating a point about the value of enrolling a wide range of patients in clinical trials. Answer choice D. All right, last one on clinical trials, number 107. According to the passage, which of the following describes a result of the way in which researchers generally conduct clinical trials? So the way that they generally conduct clinical trials is, well, it's kind of sprinkled throughout the passage. We find out that they normally collect a bunch of information from the first paragraph, and that they also do limited studies with people who only have one disease. So one of those two things seems like what we'll see in the answer choices. And this is a detail question, so whatever answer we choose will be explicitly mentioned in the passage, because it says, according to the passage. Choice A, they expend resources on the storage of information likely to be irrelevant to the study they are conducting. And so that's actually line 4. Currently, researchers collect far more background information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. So, and then we find out that, and then the next, so substantially more than hospitals collect, thereby escalating costs of data collection, storage, and analysis. So that's where storage is mentioned. And so choice A, they expend resources on the storage of information likely to be irrelevant to the study they are conducting. We found out that they collect far more than they need and that they are spending time and money on storage and analysis. So A sounds pretty good, but let's keep going. B, they sometimes compromise the accuracy of their findings by collecting and analyzing more information than is strictly required for their trials. That same bit that I just read actually also applies to this answer, and there's nothing about compromising accuracy. In fact, the whole point that they're after in collecting all this information that they probably don't need is that they want to be as accurate as possible. So they aren't compromising accuracy by collecting that much. C, they avoid the risk of overlooking variables that might affect their findings, even though doing so raises their research costs. Now, this one should be the most tempting of the wrong answer choices, but we do actually find out that this risk of overlooking variables is never entirely eliminable from research, and that's in line 12. So the risk of missing something is always there no matter how much information you collect. Therefore, the way researchers normally do their studies does not avoid the risk of overlooking something. Choice D, because they attempt to analyze too much information, they overlook facts that could emerge as relevant to their studies. Again, there is that risk there that they may overlook something, but we don't see, there's nothing in the passage that says that the extra analysis that they do results in missing things. So it's not D. And E, in order to approximate the conditions typical of medical treatment, they base their methods of information collection on those used by hospitals. This is the skimmer's answer choice. Hospitals get mentioned in that same line, so if you were just kind of glancing, oh yeah, there's the word hospitals, and then you'd say, oh yes, choice E is the right one, you'd be totally wrong. They don't base it on what hospitals have. It clearly says they collect more information than what hospitals require for sure, and more information than they strictly need. And there's hospitals that actually just don't play a role at all, except in providing a benchmark against which the amount of information they collect is compared. So, yeah, answer choice A, that they expend information on the storage of they expend resources on the storage of information that is likely to be irrelevant. All right, we turn the page to the second passage, which is longer. And so now we're on page 398. Whoops. Does help to have it in pen mode. 398, question number 108. As before, I'll give you some time to read this passage. It's longer, so I'll give you a little bit more time. I also feel like this, because it's a science passage with some detail in it, that this one's worth a little bit of extra time too, because it's, well, I find it a slightly more challenging passage. And I'm the one in charge, so you have to do what I'm going to do. Anyway, yeah, so a little bit over 4 minutes, starting now. Okay, let's stop there and get to these questions. We have a fair number of them. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions on this passage, but there's plenty of material. Again, the author on this one is not trying to convince us of anything. It's explanatory about the it's about a theory, a new theory about how gold quartz veins are formed, and kind of about what that might mean. So, without really advocating any particular course of action. So, let's take a look at our questions and see what we get. So, number 108, the author is primarily concerned with. Again, when we summarize what the main idea is, it seems like it was about this new theory and why it might be useful. Because turns out that theories are a big deal in finding gold. Who knew? Anyway, I didn't. I'm not a geologist. Choice A, is the author concerned with advocating a return to an older methodology? Absolutely not. The author is not advocating anything. So this is an example of one of those wrong answer choices where really even the first word alone, advocating, we could eliminate that one right away. Again, to be sure, it's worth reading the whole thing, but you should be immediately suspicious when upon determining that the passage is explanatory, expository, author has no opinion, that when the first word is advocating, red flags, alarms, flashing red lights should be going off in your head saying, this is almost certainly not the right answer choice. And it isn't. Choice B, explaining the importance of a recent theory. That sounds pretty good. C, enumerating differences between two widely used methods. We definitely don't have two methods. Well, we do have two methods. There's the finding gold from alluvial deposits and then, this more kind of survey-oriented work. But the passage is not primarily about enumerating the differences between them. Choice D, describing events leading to a discovery. So not it. And choice E, challenging the assumptions on which a theory is based. We don't really deal with the assumptions of a theory, so it's not E, and this one is pretty straightforwardly answer choice B, explaining the importance of a recent theory. Question number 109. According to the passage, the widely held view of Archean age gold quartz vein systems is that such systems, blah. Where do we find about Archean age gold quartz systems? That's at the very beginning of the passage. And we find out that they were formed more than 2 billion years ago from magmatic fluid, according to the new theory. And we need to hear about the widely held view. So the new theory, the recent theory, says Archean age gold quartz vein systems were formed more than 2 billion years ago from magmatic fluids that originated from molten granite-like bodies deep beneath the surface of the Earth. This theory is contrary to the widely held view that the systems were deposited from metamorphic fluids, that is, from fluids that formed during the dehydration of wet sedimentary rocks. So, the widely held view is that they were deposited from metamorphic fluids. Let's find that in the answer choices. A, were formed from metamorphic fluids. Wow, well, that sounds pretty great, actually. There's almost no chance that that is not the right answer. The only other one that's right, and so B originated in molten granite-like bodies. That is something that occurs right in that paragraph, right before, but that's part of the new theory rather than the old one. So again, we're dealing more with how wrong answer choices are constructed, and that one is a devious one because it comes right from the same passage in just a sentence before. So it's not B. Choice C, were formed from alluvial deposits. That's the wrong paragraph. In fact, it's not that many rocks at all that are formed from alluvial deposits, probably only sedimentary ones. Outside knowledge, though. Anyway, choice D, generally have surface expression. Again, that's information from elsewhere in the passage. E, are not discoverable through chemical tests, and that's not even a factor. So really the one that is clearest was the one that we found right away, choice A, that they were formed from metamorphic fluids, which is what it says at the beginning of the passage. All right, question number 110. The passage implies that which of the following steps would be the first performed by explorers who wish to maximize their chances of discovering gold? So this one is definitely tricky. What we find out about how people find gold in paragraph 3. That's where there's that whole process of survey work where they have aerial images, magnetic, electrical, and mineralogical properties of the rocks, chemical tests, and then it says, however, none of these high technology methods are of any value if the sites to which they are applied have never mineralized. And to maximize the chances of discovery, the explorer must therefore pay particular attention to selecting the ground formations most likely to be mineralized. So it sounds like that's the first step. First step is to find a section, find a part of the ground that, based on what they know about how minerals are formed, they need to find a ground formation that is likely to have minerals in it. And then they start testing to see whether minerals are actually there. So let's look for something that says something about finding ground formations that are likely to be mineralized. So A, surveying several sites known to have been formed more than 2 billion years ago. Well, age alone doesn't really have anything to do with whether something is mineralized, so I don't think it's going to be A. B, limiting exploration to sites known to have been formed from metamorphic fluid. Now, if they're using the new theory, this might be true, but we're not actually limiting this to explorers using this new theory. So specifying metamorphic fluid, metamorphic fluid is the old theory, magmatic is the new theory, and since we aren't specifying what theory the explorers are using, I don't think, well, let's keep this one actually, because it's too early to tell. C, using an appropriate conceptual model to select a site for further exploration. That sounds possible because, again, they're trying to narrow down likely sites. D, using geophysical methods to analyze rocks over a broad area. That sounds like kind of a detail thing that they do once they have identified a site, so it's not going to be D. E, limiting exploration to sites where alluvial gold has previously been found. That's also possible because, again, they're looking to maximize their chances of finding, say, gold. Actually, gold is the one here. So, yes, now we have it down to 3 answer choices. Let's kind of refresh our memory here. First, what is the thing that they want to do first? Well, we found out that they wanted to pay particular attention to selecting the ground formations most likely to be mineralized. I didn't actually read the next sentence. The next sentence says, such ground selection relies to varying degrees on conceptual models, which take into account theoretical studies of relevant factors. And so that actually sounds most like answer choice C, using an appropriate conceptual model to select a site for further exploration. Choice B, limiting exploration to sites known to have been formed from metamorphic fluid, really only deals with the specific conceptual model that people were using. That still is not necessarily, there's plenty of metamorphic fluid out there. They're looking for ones that have been originated from molten granite-like bodies deep beneath the surface of the Earth. So B unnecessarily limits what we were after. And D, using geophysical, am I on the right one? Yeah, using geophysical methods to analyze rocks over, E. Limiting exploration to sites where alluvial gold has previously been found. While that does get mentioned, it does say that that basically, while that method still leads to some discovery, it says most of the gold that's out there hasn't been discovered because people are basically using that same alluvial deposit method. So choice E is not necessarily going to be the first good step for a prospector, leaving us with choice C, using the appropriate conceptual model to identify a place that's likely to have gold. So that one's trickier. All right. Onward to number 111. That's actually the next page. So page 399, question number 111. Which of the following statements about discoveries of gold deposits is supported by information in the passage? So we need to support a statement in the answer choices from information in the passage. There's no pre-reading that we can do on this one. We actually just have to kind of go for it and see which ones sound supportable, and then look for support if we don't remember that it's there. Choice A. The number of gold discoveries made annually has increased between the time of the original gold rushes and the present. There's no support whatsoever about the rate of gold discovery, so this is, I think we can pretty easily eliminate that one. Choice B, new discoveries of gold deposits are likely to be the result of exploration techniques designed to locate buried mineralization. Well, we did have that bit that I alluded to before. It said, although these same methods lead to an occasional discovery, where these same methods is the those alluvial deposits. Most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression. So let's keep B. C, it is unlikely that newly discovered gold deposits will ever yield as much as did those deposits discovered during the original gold rushes. There's really nothing about volume of gold from these respective deposits, so I think we can rule this one out. Choice D, modern explorers are divided on the question of the utility of simple prospecting methods as a source of new discoveries of gold deposits. Well, we don't actually have the utility of simple prospecting. It does say that it's still useful for looking for gold in rivers or in former river deposits, but we don't see anything in the passage about modern explorers being divided on any particular issue. So I think we can safely get rid of that one. And E, models based on the theory that gold originated from magmatic fluids have already led to new discoveries of gold deposits. So we do actually get something in the second paragraph. It says, the recently developed theory has considerable practical importance. But it actually doesn't go so far as to tell us that it's already led to new discoveries. And just because it has practical importance, it can still be potential practical importance. The passage does not support the notion that the stuff's already coming up out of the ground. So while E is promising at first because of line 10, where there's practical importance, we don't actually know that they've found any gold this way. Whereas with choice B, new discoveries of gold deposits are likely to be the result of exploration techniques designed to locate buried mineralization. That's the line 16, where it says, most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression, implying that most of the gold that's out there is under the ground, and new discoveries are therefore, because most of the gold, the probability is that if you're going to find new gold, it's going to be one of the underground sources. So it's answer choice B. Another way to say that, it was, let's just say that 9 out of 10 gold deposits now are underground and don't have surface expression. If 9 out of 10 are underground, that means the odds are, if you're finding a new one, it's going to be underground. All right, number 112. It can be inferred from the passage that which of the following is easiest to detect? Well, we don't have a whole lot of detection. The main thing that we have detection-wise is in paragraph 2 here. We found out that previous gold was found from surface traces in alluvial deposits and from these kind of surface prospecting methods. So it's probably going to be something like that. So choice A gold quartz vein system originating in magmatic fluids. Well, if the new theory is correct and they can figure out ways to identify sections with magmatic fluids, that might be true, but they still have to determine whether this theory is actually right, and that's not going to be the easy way. B, a gold quartz vein system originating in metamorphic fluids. That's the prevailing widely held theory, but again, that's not necessarily any easier for all the reasons described in the third paragraph, that they have to do all this surveying, and then they still often don't find it. C, a gold deposit that is mixed with granite. That's basically not really anything from the passage. We do find that granite-like bodies, but nothing beyond that. D, a gold deposit that has shed alluvial gold. So alluvial gold is the stuff that's washed away by rivers. That's how most of the gold has been found, and that appears to be the easiest way because it's right there on the surface. So this is pretty promising. And then choice E, a gold deposit that exhibits chemical halos. So chemical halos are mentioned. What was that? Line 27, sensitive chemical tests that are able to detect the subtle chemical halos that often envelop mineralization. So that's part of the more detailed survey work. Once they identify a site that is kind of likely to have gold, they can do that chemical test. But that alone is not going to be the easiest to detect because they've already done some work up until that point. The easiest is just to find some gold in the river and say, aha. So it is in fact answer choice D, gold deposit that has shed alluvial gold. All right, number 113. The theory mentioned in lines 1 to 5 relates to the conceptual models discussed in the passage in which of the following ways. So this is a kind of a two-step one. The first they want to ask us about the theory mentioned in lines 1 to 5. 1 to 5, Archean age gold quartz vein systems were formed more than 2 billion years ago from magmatic fluids that originated from molten granite-like bodies deep beneath the surface of the Earth, and that's in opposition to the metamorphic fluids. So that's the theory. How does it relate to conceptual models? Where do we hear about conceptual models? We actually don't hear about them until the very end. It's the end of paragraph 3 and then basically paragraph 4, where we're talking about how prospectors first try to find land and rock formations that are likely to have gold based on its geological makeup, and then they start doing that more detailed survey work. It says such ground selection relies to varying degrees on conceptual models, which take into account theoretical studies of relevant factors. And those models, and that's actually what I have written down here for paragraph 4, those models are a mixture of empirical evidence, which is stuff that is determined by observation, and then theories about how ore is created. And that's actually what the theory mentioned in the beginning is, this theory that gold quartz is formed from magmatic and not metamorphic fluids, all that. Okay, so that's an ore theory that would be mixed with empirical evidence to form the conceptual model. So let's look for something kind of related to that, because that's, again, just kind of my paraphrasing. We want something related to that in the answer choices. And again, that process that I went through in kind of describing that, obviously talking about it out loud takes longer than the thought process that you would actually go through on the real GMAT. I'm just kind of illustrating what could be going on in your head when you run into something like this, not that you would actually talk it through in such a lengthy fashion. So in general, I guess the point is everything that I'm doing takes less time for real on the GMAT when you're just doing it in your own head, because you don't have to say it out loud to the internet. So A, would that theory furnish a valid account of ore forming processes and hence can support conceptual models that have great practical significance? So that sounds close to right. We'll leave that one as an option, because again, we were talking about how these ore theories could be used with empirical evidence to form conceptual models that they use for identifying likely sites for mineralization. B, does that theory suggest that certain geological formations long believed to be mineralized are in fact mineralized, thus confirming current conceptual models? Wow. No, I mean, they don't actually find out whether a certain rock formation is mineralized until they start digging and find minerals. I don't know if this helps in your understanding. Minerals are, these certain substances that, they have, a certain molecular structure, things like gold. It doesn't have to be an element, whereas rocks are just, mixtures of things, and ore are rocks that contain minerals. Okay, good story. Anyway, outside knowledge, but it might make it easier to understand what they're talking about here. Geological formations long believed to be mineralized are in fact mineralized. The theory does nothing for that. It's only the practical, like digging into the ground and doing these chemical tests that determine whether something is mineralized. So that's not it. C, it suggests there may not be enough It suggests that there may not be enough similarity across Archean age gold quartz vein systems to warrant the formulation of conceptual models. We don't hear anything about similarity of Archean age gold quartz vein systems, so That's not it. Does that theory correct existing theories about the chemical halos of gold deposits and thus provide a basis for correcting current conceptual models? No. There's nothing about correcting chemical halos or theories about chemical halos. And E, it suggests that simple prospecting methods still have a higher success rate in the discovery of gold deposits than do more modern methods. In fact, the passage really does imply the opposite. It says, although this alluvial deposit method still yields occasional discoveries, most deposits are underground, and so it doesn't sound like the alluvial deposit method is really going to do that much. So it's not E. So going back to A, let's just read that again. It may furnish a valid account of ore forming processes and hence can support conceptual models that have great practical significance. That actually sounds like what we found out from paragraph 4, that they use these theories about how mineral-bearing ore is created and then look for places that have that type of rock. And then use empirical evidence like, oh, well, hey, there's some of that rock actually here, and here's a chemical halo. I don't actually even know what a chemical halo is, but apparently they can find them. Anyway, the point is that these theories, these ore theories, that's what the theory mentioned at the beginning of the passage is. So really, choice A is the only reasonable choice. Okay, last one. Last one on gold ore, minerals, alluvial deposits, and Archean age gold quartz veins. Number 114. So according to the passage, methods of exploring for gold that are widely used today are based on which of the following facts? Methods for exploring. Well, we find out about exploring for gold in paragraph 3, where it's mostly this survey work that they do. So let's just look for something like that. Are the methods of exploring for gold based on A, most of the Earth's remaining gold deposits are still molten? Yikes, no way. B, most of the Earth's remaining gold deposits are exposed at the surface. In fact, that's the opposite of what is likely to be true, because we're finding that they're doing all this survey work and chemical testing before they start digging. So if they were exposed at the surface, the method of just kind of looking for alluvial deposits would totally be the way to go. So it's not B. Are the current methods based on the fact that most of the Earth's remaining gold deposits are buried and have no surface expression? That sounds pretty good, actually. That's why they do all that survey work, is because they're hoping that deep under the ground is where the gold is. D, only one type of gold deposit warrants exploration, since the other types of gold deposits are found in regions difficult to reach. I don't know, those of you who know more about geology, that may be true, but it's certainly beyond the scope of the passage, and there's definitely no support for that in the passage. Choice E, only one type of gold deposit warrants exploration, since the other types of gold deposits are unlikely to yield concentrated quantities of gold. We don't actually find out anything about different types of gold deposits. I mean, yes, we have the ones that are near the surface and then the ones that are underground, but they may be the same type of gold. So, again, it's not answer choice E. Only C makes sense, that most of the gold is underground. If it weren't underground, they wouldn't have to do all this crazy research and survey work. So, answer choice C. Okay, so I think there is a good place to stop. We got done a little bit early. Let me just check the Grockit page to see if anybody posted anything that sounds like a question. Occasionally people say, hey, I can't hear you, or actually usually it's not that, but it's worth checking. Every once in a while someone has a question. I don't really get how it works. Well, that looks like that was posted a while ago, but I guess those of you who have been watching know how it works. Mostly, and this is true of the 2 official guide TV programs, where it's expected that you have the book in front of you, and you're following along as the instructor is reading through it. This is different from the worked questions TV program where I think it's Johnny who's going through those, and he's going through the questions that are actually in Grockit, showing you how he goes through those particular questions. So it's not always the same. Not all the TV programs are using official guides, but both of them are kind of assuming that you are following along and doing some of the work in your head and understanding, oh, see, this is how, this is how the instructor goes through it. It's not, it doesn't obligate you to go through it the same way, but you certainly can. Anyway, okay, well, that sounds good, and yeah, we'll stop there. And we will pick up again tomorrow with the next passage, and I think we do 2 more. Yeah, because the next one has, the one after the next one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 questions on it. So that'll be plenty for next time. Thank you very much for joining me today. You've been watching Grockit.com, the OGTV program. We're going through the official guide to the test. That's it right there. 12th edition. Previous editions won't do you as much good. And my name's Jim Jacobson. I have been talking to you for the past almost an hour. And unless I'm sick or something or have technical difficulties, I'll be talking to you tomorrow. Well, I guess if you didn't tune in, I wouldn't talk to you either. Anyway, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.